everything that transpired to the day that I got sentenced after I got arrested was very confusing. I was 23 years old. And so I didn't know anything. I've never been arrested before. I didn't know anything really about the legal system. And so everything that my lawyer was telling me, nothing was like adding up. It was just always like one hurdle after another. I felt lost. I felt like I was scared because it was just nothing was, like I felt like my lawyer was just leading me incorrectly. And so that one day that, the day that they were sentencing me, I remember the prosecutor, she was standing up and she asked that I get 20 years in prison. And I remember just thinking like, what have I done to make this lady think that I should go to prison for 20 years? You know, like I just couldn't, I mean, I don't think there's any words that I could really kind of give you right now that would kind of explain that feeling at that moment. I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone because no one was hearing me. My lawyer came in and offered me, brought me a 5-year plea. And I remember when he brought me that 5-year plea agreement, I freaked out. I was like, I cannot do 5 years for something I didn't do. And when he showed me my discovery papers, which was like, I think it was like 10 pages max, I cannot remember. And I remember reading through it and I was thinking, this stuff is not even true. Like we need to go, like this all, I can prove this. This is not, we're not talking about drugs here. We're talking about an actual car. There's actual black and white, you know, to prove this. And, you know, there's actual bank stubs and payments. Like this is not true. We're not talking about drugs here. We're talking about the actual things that we're actually speaking of, you know? And so I was like, let's take it to trial. And he told me that, no, let me tell you something. If you take it to trial, the feds have a 98% conviction rate and you will lose and you will get 15 years. And he said, this is what you do. You're not going to offer you anything less than 5 years because your minimum is 5 years. So take this plea agreement. You've already spent the year in county and I'll make sure you'll get into this program and you'll do another year and then you can start your life over. Or you can take it to trial and lose and get the 15 years. I feel like I'm pushed against the wall. So I signed this plea agreement. And which was crazy because even after that, when I submitted the plea, the night before, he all of a sudden found a discrepancy that no one has ever even told me about. And my minimum then drops to 0 years. So still to this day, I don't know what that discrepancy is that dropped my minimum to 0 years. But I just know that the day that I got sentenced, I was sentenced to 13 years, 9 months. Only day I remember of that, that day that I got sentenced was me yelling, my lawyer standing next to me, not saying anything, not taking up for me. And the only thing I remember is when the judge had said something, is my mom scream out. And I remember just turning to her and I said, it's okay, Mom. God had to do it this way. They just pushed me out the courtroom. I still didn't know how much time I had. And so, only thing he was telling me is when we got back there is that we're going to put in an appeal. We're going to put in an appeal. And so we put in the appeal. Well, he submitted the paperwork for the appeal. And, but I fired him. I fired him because nothing that he told me, not one single thing that he told me happened, not one. So I get another lawyer, and that lawyer, I remember the first time I talked to her, I was already in prison when I spoke to her, so I never met her, so I met her through the phone. And she's like, oh, she made me believe in her, you know? And she said, oh, you got a bad deal. You just got mixed up with some really bad people, and we're gonna get this correct. And then a month later, she calls me again, and she said, yeah, I talked to your prosecutor, and she said that yeah, you got a pretty bad deal and this, that, and the other, but the only way she'll work with you and even consider anything is if you drop your appeal. And she said, I took a look at your case, and she sent me this outline. She said, I mailed you something, which I had in my hand, and it was like 6 bullet points on why I should drop my appeal. And she said, in her professional opinion, I would lose my appeal, and this was the only way that, this is my only chance in helping myself. So here it was 2010, and my paperwork said that I wasn't due to leave federal prison the end of 2022. So, I mean, this is this woman's job. This is what she does, so I would think she has my best interest. So I dropped my appeal. So now that it's 2019, the reason why that I'm able to even be sitting here right now is because of Obama's drugs minus 2. If you had a drug crime, he basically, to try to level it out a little bit, you were taking 2 points off of your sentencing, which would drop your number down, which still I was taking 3 years. Now remember, I signed for 5 years and I was sentenced to 165 months. So that's 13 years, 9 months. The drugs minus 2 took 3 years off of my sentence. So they still didn't calculate my resentencing correctly as far as going across those guidelines, but that's why I'm here today instead of 2022.